The document had 3 names on it, and Hannah Whitlock's pen was hovering over the one that mattered most. A marriage certificate binding her, legally, permanently, to a man who had not opened his eyes in 3 weeks. He was comatose, lifeless, except for the machines breathing for him. A man she was about to marry without him ever knowing her face, her voice, or her name. It wasn't a deed. It wasn't a loan agreement. It was a wedding license, drawn up by a lawyer in a charcoal suit who looked like he closed deals like this every week, and the groom's signature line had already been filled in by someone else's hand, because the groom himself was lying 10 feet away in a hospital bed, a ventilator hissing in rhythm with his chest. "Sign here, Miss Whitlock," the lawyer said, tapping the line beneath Julian Calloway's name. "Once this is filed, you become his legal next of kin, his wife. That gives the family the stability the board needs, and it gives your mother the transplant fund she needs to live. Refuse, and both of those things disappear by Friday." Hannah's hand was shaking so badly, the pen nearly slipped off the paper. She looked past the lawyer, past Beatrice Calloway standing rigid by the window, to the man in the bed, broad shoulders, sharp jaw, dark lashes resting still against pale skin. A stranger she had only ever seen from a distance while helping her mother polish the floors of his family's mansion. He didn't know her name. He didn't know this was happening. And in less than 60 seconds, she was going to become his wife anyway. She thought of her mother, 3 floors down in the dialysis unit, too weak to lift a glass of water without help. She thought of the eviction notice still folded in her coat pocket. Then she signed her name beneath his, and just like that, Hannah Whitlock ceased to exist, and Hannah Calloway, wife to a man in a coma, began. She had no idea that the moment her signature dried on that page, she had also just become the only thing standing between her new husband and someone who wanted him dead before he ever opened his eyes again. If you love a romance where loyalty saves a life before love even gets the chance to bloom, where the villain gets exactly what's coming to them, and where the ending will have you smiling through tears, stay with me, because this story is unlike anything you've heard before. Let's go back to where it all started. Hannah Whitlock was 24, the daughter of a housekeeper, and she had spent her whole life being invisible in rooms full of wealth. Her mother, Margaret Whitlock, had worked for the Calloway family for 15 years, and when Margaret's kidneys began failing 6 months earlier, it was the Calloway's money that kept her alive. Dialysis 3 times a week, medication Hannah could never have afforded on her own, and the Calloway's silent expectation of loyalty that came bundled with every bill they paid. When Julian Calloway was found unconscious at the base of the east staircase of the family estate, the official story was a fall, a missed step, too much wine. Beatrice Calloway, Julian's grandmother, didn't believe it for a second. The only person in that house who had ever called Hannah by her first name instead of the help. Julian's parents had died in a car accident when he was 9 years old, and it was Beatrice who had raised him. Beatrice who had built Calloway Holdings back up from the brink twice in her lifetime. And Beatrice who now refused to watch her grandson lose everything a second time. With Julian comatose and the board threatening to dissolve his control of the company unless a stable family structure could be proven, Beatrice called Hannah into her study and made her an offer that wasn't really an offer at all. "I need you to marry my grandson," Beatrice said, plain as ordering tea. Hannah actually laughed. "He's in a coma." "I'm aware." Beatrice's eyes were wet, but her voice didn't shake. "Desmond is circling this company like a vulture, and if Julian doesn't have a legal spouse before the next board vote, Desmond inherits everything, the company, this house, even guardianship of Julian's medical decisions. I cannot let that happen. Not to my boy. Why me? Because you're the only person under this roof who has never once asked me for anything, Beatrice said, reaching for Hannah's hand. Marry him, and your mother's transplant fund is secured permanently, not month to month at my mercy. Say no, and Desmond will make sure Margaret Whitlock is the first thing he cuts when he takes over. Hannah stared at the folder on the desk for a long time. Then she opened it and reached for the pen, and an hour later found herself in the hospital chapel, signing the marriage certificate that made the arrangement final. What she didn't know yet was how dangerous that signature had just made her. Hannah moved into a guest room near the hospital and made herself a fixture by Julian's bedside, against the quiet disapproval of nearly everyone except Beatrice. She bathed him gently when the night nurse was short-staffed. She turned him every few hours to prevent bed sores. She read to him, business reports some nights, an old worn romance novel on others, because she liked to imagine, foolishly, that somewhere inside that silence, he could hear her. She didn't know that he could. What she also didn't know was how many small, quiet attempts had already been made on his life. A feeding tube, accidentally mismeasured, a medication dosage adjusted by someone outside his approved care team, the oxygen monitor unplugged for 4 unexplained minutes one night while the assigned nurse was conveniently on break. Each time, Hannah was the one who noticed. The dosage that looked wrong, the monitor that had gone dark, the tube that didn't match his weight chart. She caught every single attempt without ever realizing she was catching anything at all. To her, it looked like carelessness, like hospital understaffing, like bad luck. She reported it each time out of instinct, never once suspecting she was the only obstacle standing between her husband and a killer who wanted him gone before he could ever wake up and reclaim what was his. She had no idea that Julian Calloway had quietly opened his eyes 3 weeks earlier than anyone knew, and had decided not to tell a soul. He woke in the middle of the night to the sound of a woman's voice reading a sentence about a thief falling in love with a princess he was supposed to rob. For a moment, Julian thought he was dreaming. Then his eyes opened a sliver, and he saw her, a young woman with tired eyes and gentle hands, sitting in a chair pulled close to his bed, a paperback novel resting on her knee, completely unaware that he was watching her at all. He didn't move. He didn't speak. Something instinctive in him, some old survival reflex sharpened by a fall down a staircase he was almost certain had not been an accident, told him to wait, to watch, to learn who was really in this room with him before revealing that he could hear every word. For 9 days, Julian Calloway pretended to be exactly what everyone believed him to be, unconscious. And for 9 days, he watched Hannah Whitlock bathe him with more gentleness than he'd ever received from anyone who actually knew his name, watched her catch a nurse's medication error and quietly correct it, watched her read to him every night like he was a person worth talking to and not a fortune worth inheriting. He had grown up surrounded by people who wanted something from him. Hannah wanted nothing. She didn't seem to know or care that he was Julian Calloway, heir to a fortune. She only seemed to know him as a man who needed someone to care whether he lived or died. By the 9th night, Julian could no longer pretend. Hannah was halfway through a sentence, her voice soft in the dim hospital light, when she felt fingers close gently around her wrist. She froze. "Don't be afraid," Julian rasped, his voice rough from disuse, his eyes finally open and fixed entirely on her. "Please, don't run." Hannah's book slid off her lap and hit the floor with a thud. You've been awake? For 9 days, he admitted, guilt flickering across his face. I needed to know who was really in this room with me before I let anyone know I could hear them. I needed to know if I could trust you. And? Hannah's voice trembled. Julian's grip on her wrist softened into something closer to holding her hand. You saved my life more than once. I watched you catch things the staff missed. Things that weren't accidents, Hannah. Someone has been trying to kill me in this hospital, and you've been stopping them without even knowing it. Hannah's blood ran cold. Then we need to tell someone. Security, the police. Not yet, Julian said quietly. Whoever's doing this is close enough to the family to access my medical team. If we move too fast, they'll just try again, somewhere I can't be protected. I need to heal first. And I need, he added, his thumb brushing softly over her knuckles, to know more about the woman who married a stranger to save her mother's life, and ended up saving mine instead. What followed were the strangest, most tender weeks of Hannah's life. By day, the hospital staff and the Calloway family believed Julian remained in a deep but stable coma, slowly improving on his own. By night, when the floor was quiet and only Hannah remained, Julian was fully awake, talking with her in whispers, asking about her childhood, her mother, the dreams she'd buried under years of cleaning other people's houses to survive. You read romance novels to a comatose man, Julian said one night, smiling for what Hannah realized might be the first genuine smile she'd ever seen on his face. Why? Because someone should get a happy ending read to them, Hannah said softly, even if they can't hear it. I figured if you were in there somewhere, you deserved a little hope. I heard every word, Julian admitted. I think some nights that book is the only reason I fought to come back at all. It was during those secret midnight hours that Hannah learned why Julian feared revealing he was awake. His cousin, Desmond Calloway, stood to inherit control of the company if Julian remained incapacitated past the next board vote. And Desmond's fiancée, Sienna Marlowe, had once been Julian's own fiancée, until she'd left him for Desmond the very week Calloway holding stock had taken a temporary dip. Julian suspected, though he had no proof yet, that one or both of them were behind the attempts on his life. She told me once, Julian said quietly, staring at the ceiling, that she could never love a man who wasn't certain to inherit everything. I used to think that was cruelty. Now I think it might have been a warning. Hannah said nothing, but she held his hand a little tighter that night, and Julian let her. When Julian finally woke publicly, choreographed carefully with Beatrice's help to look like a natural recovery, the hospital erupted in relief, and Desmond's congratulations were so smooth, so immediate, that Hannah felt sick watching him perform concern he clearly didn't feel. Sienna stood beside Desmond in the doorway, her smile painted on, her eyes calculating everything she'd lost the moment Julian opened his eyes again. Julian was discharged 3 weeks later, confined to a wheelchair, his legs weakened by months of muscle atrophy that doctors warned could take a year or more to fully recover, if it recovered at all. I'm not waiting a year, Julian told Hannah the night he came home, gripping the wheels of his chair with white-knuckled frustration. I want to walk again. I need you to help me. So she did. Every morning before sunrise, in the privacy of the estate's east garden, where no one else woke early enough to see, Hannah helped Julian stand between 2 parallel bars salvaged from an old physical therapy clinic, her hands steady on his waist as his legs shook beneath him. You're not going to fall, she promised him, the same words every single morning. I've got you. Week by week, one wobbling step further than the last, He grew stronger than any doctor predicted, and Hannah was there for every one of those mornings, the only person in the world who knew it was happening. "I used to think love was something that happened to other people," Julian told her one morning, breathless after his longest walk yet, his hand still resting on her shoulder for balance. "Something that happened to people who weren't surrounded by people wanting their money instead of them." "And now?" Hannah asked quietly. "Now I think it happened to me in a hospital room with a woman who didn't know my name was worth anything at all." He reached for her hand, steady this time, no shaking left in his grip. "I love you, Hannah, not because you saved my life, because of who you are when you think no one's watching." Hannah's eyes filled with tears, and when Julian leaned down and kissed her, slow, certain, the first kiss either of them had allowed themselves after months of careful restraint, it felt less like a beginning and more like something that had been true for a very long time, finally being spoken aloud. If you are enjoying the story so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Your support means a lot and helps us bring you more exciting and heartfelt stories. Thank you. Back to the story. The Callaway Foundation Gala was the social event of the year. Every major shareholder, every society columnist, every old family name in the city gathered under one roof. It was also, conveniently, exactly 6 months after Julian's accident, and Desmond had used the opportunity to all but announce himself as the company's stabilizing future leader, given his cousin's ongoing recovery. Hannah arrived at Julian's side in a wheelchair pushed by Walter, the family's loyal head of security, exactly as planned. Sienna found them within minutes, draped in diamonds, her smile sharp as glass. "Still in that chair," Sienna said, feigning sympathy with theatrical precision. "Such a shame. And you," she added, looking Hannah up and down, "still playing dress-up as a Callaway. Tell me, sweetheart, does it still feel like charity work? Or have you finally accepted you'll never really belong here?" A ripple of quiet laughter spread among the nearby guests. Hannah felt her face burn, but she said nothing, her chin lifted, her hand resting protectively on Julian's shoulder. "Careful, Sienna," Julian said evenly. "You're embarrassing yourself." "Am I?" Sienna's eyes glittered. "Or am I simply pointing out the obvious? A broken man in a wheelchair, married to a maid because no one with real options would have him now." The room had gone quiet enough to hear it. And then Julian Callaway stood up. Gasps rippled across the ballroom as he rose from the wheelchair. Slowly, deliberately, every eye in the room locked on legs no one believed could carry him anymore. He stepped away from the chair entirely, steady, certain, a billionaire heir to one of the largest fortunes in the country, standing tall in front of 300 witnesses who had been told for months that this moment might never come. "I walk now," Julian said simply, "because of her." He held his hand out to Hannah. "May I have this dance?" The orchestra, cued by Beatrice from across the room with tears already in her eyes, shifted into a slow waltz. Julian led Hannah onto the dance floor and danced with her, flawlessly, gracefully, every step a quiet, devastating answer to every doubt anyone in that room had ever whispered about her. While the entire gala watched in stunned silence, Sienna stood frozen at the edge of the dance floor, her champagne glass trembling in her hand, watching the man she had abandoned the week his stock dipped, now standing taller and happier than she had ever seen him, dancing with the woman she had just humiliated minutes earlier. "Julian," Sienna called out suddenly, pushing through the crowd as the music slowed, her composure finally cracking. "Wait, I made a mistake. I never stopped loving you. Come back to me. We're destined." "Destined?" Julian's voice was calm, but it carried across the silent ballroom like a verdict. Fate didn't bring me to a boardroom or a stock ticker, Sienna. It brought me to a hospital room, to a woman who sat with a stranger every night and read him love stories because she thought he deserved hope. I forgive you for wishing me gone, but I will never regret choosing her instead of the life you wanted me for. He leaned down, cupped Hannah's face gently, and kissed her again, slow and sure, in front of every person who had ever doubted her, and the ballroom erupted into applause. Sienna didn't stay to watch the rest. She turned, tears streaking her makeup, and fled the ballroom in full view of 300 guests, pausing once at the doors to look back at the dance floor, at the life she had walked away from now glowing brighter than she ever imagined it could, before disappearing into the night. What no one at the gala knew yet was that the investigation Julian had quietly commissioned during his months of recovery had finally produced results. Walter, working with a private security team Julian trusted completely, had traced the tampered medication records, the falsified hospital logs, and the disabled monitoring equipment back to a hospital administrator on Desmond's payroll, and a paper trail of wire transfers connecting both Desmond and Sienna to the payments. The same week as the gala, with the evidence airtight, Desmond and Sienna were formally charged with conspiracy to commit murder. The trial that followed was swift and merciless under the weight of the evidence: falsified medical records, financial records, even a recorded confession from the bribed administrator who turned on his employers the moment he was offered a plea deal. Desmond Calloway and Sienna Marlowe were both sentenced to lengthy prison terms, stripped of every title, every privilege, every claim to the Calloway name they had tried so desperately to steal. But the gala wasn't finished the night Sienna fled it. With the music paused and every guest still watching, Julian turned back to Hannah, lowered himself onto one knee in front of the entire ballroom, and took her hand. "Hannah Whitlock," he said, his voice carrying clear and steady, "I married you in a hospital chapel when you didn't even know if I could hear you. You sat with me when you thought I'd never wake up. You taught me to walk again when the whole world had already written me off. I don't need a contract to tell you that I'm yours. I need you to know that I chose you, wide awake, with my eyes open, every single day since." He reached into his jacket and withdrew a small velvet box. "Will you marry me again, properly, in front of everyone who will ever again doubt what you mean to this family?" Hannah, openly crying now, could only nod as Julian slid the ring onto her finger to a ballroom full of applause and Beatrice's open weeping from the front row. Then Julian rose, faced the crowd, and lifted his glass. 6 months ago, this family nearly lost everything: me, the company, and the people who actually deserved to be protected, he said. I owe my life, twice over, to a woman this family once treated as invisible. Tonight, I want every person in this room to know exactly who Hannah Calloway is. Not the help, not a contract, not a convenience. She is the reason I'm standing here at all. And as of this morning, he added, glancing at his lawyer near the edge of the room, who gave a small nod, she is also formally and irrevocably entitled to half of everything I own. The room rose in a standing ovation. Beatrice was the first to embrace Hannah, followed by relatives who had ignored her for months, suddenly welcoming her with open arms, the way wealth so often rewrites memory. Margaret Whitlock, watching from a table near the front in a dress Hannah had bought her with her very first Calloway allowance, wept the happiest tears of her life. A year later, in a true wedding bathed in daylight and surrounded by family, Margaret walked her daughter down the aisle, while Julian waited at the altar without a wheelchair, without a cane, without a single trace of the man the world had once written off. "I love you," he whispered as she reached him, "for choosing to care for a stranger who couldn't even say thank you." "I love you," Hannah whispered back, "for waking up and choosing me anyway." Some years later, Beatrice still rocked her great-grandson to sleep every evening with the same worn paperback romance novel that had once read a comatose man back to life, smiling every time she reached the line about a thief who finally deserved the princess he loved. If this story made you believe that good hearts get rewarded and that love really can wake someone from the darkest place imaginable, let me know in the comments which moment hit you hardest. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories just like this one, because there are so many more hearts left to break, heal, and finally find their happy ending. Until next time.